Good afternoon. Welcome back to Passionate World Talk Radio Network, a wholly owned subsidiary of Global Media Network LLC. And on today's episode, we're doing things a little bit differently. It is a comparison for those who are history buffs between the the late 18th century, the late 19th century going into the 20th century, Tammany Hall, presented by the Democrats, versus our current president and his elite and wealthy billionaire, trillionaire supporters. And the article is from Politico. The Gilded Age is back, and that should worry conservatives. So, and if you want to hear more and follow the link to its inevitable conclusion, please go over to passionatworldtalkradio.com/blog, and you can read all about it along with the audio from this week's podcast and fill yourself in all the juicy parts that I will probably leave out so you can pursue it on your own time. That's a good thought. Okay. Joshua Zeitz, capital Zeitz, is a political magazine contributing writer. He's the author of Lincoln's God, How Faith Transformed a President and Nation, put out in May 2023. And you can follow him at JOSHUAMZEITZ. Okay. When our current president held his second inauguration, he promised to usher America into a new golden age. Everybody catch that? And he was surrounded in the Capitol Rotunda by a handful of tech billionaires who companies account for roughly, think of this, folks, 1/5 of the market cap of U.S. public equities. It's not subtle, as it's in your face sign that the second administration of our president will be staffed, advised, and led by titans of wealth. Echo of the Freemasons, Masons for rule the world. Which means that our current president's golden age looks an awful lot like the new Gilded Age. The Gilded Age, should you ask, was the era in the late 19th century when business and industry dominated our lives as never before or since. It was a period of unprecedented economic growth and growing wealth inequality. The titans of the industry enjoyed enormous control over political institutions, while everyday Americans, that's you and me, the peons of the world, buckled under the strain of change. And as that gap widened between the haves and the have-nots, political culture ultimately grew coarse and violent. And to keep on making these comparisons, growing income and wealth inequality opened a rift in our society, with a small group of elites amassing substantial power and influence. In the Gilded Age, may I remind you, industrial magnates like John D. Rockefeller, Andrew Carnegie dominated our public life, and while today tech CEOs like Elon Musk and John Bezos hold sway, political corruption and patronage were rampant then, and it's still rampant today, which raise a concerning voice over corporate influence in our politics now. Both periods witness intense political polarization and social upheaval, reflecting deep divisions within our society. Despite our president's mass appeal among white working class voters and the fact that he performed better with working class voters of other races than ever before, his coziness with billionaires like Musk and his pursuit of an economic agenda that focuses on tax breaks for the wealthy Americans suggests that his second term will be more of a boon to modern day tycoons than us, the peons, the average working person. And that can mean that the coming of America's second Gilded Age carries with it a warning for the GOP. By the 1890s, transferring my numbers again, to the 1910s, fundamentally reordering the social compact between citizens and their government. And should our current president and his allies make good on their promise to refashion America in ways that prove widely unpopular, the counter-revolution they set in place could well be the defining trope of the 2030s and beyond. Now, you're kind of wondering, where did this golden age come from, or Gilded Age? It was a result of the Civil War, which accelerated our transformation from a country of small towns, shops, and farms into an urban industrial giant. And the challenge supporting 2 million soldiers and sailors increased industrial development. Kind of makes you wonder about the war with South America that our president is trying to get going. To fund the Union war effort, Congress borrowed heavily and created the first uniform paper currency. The resulting expansion of that monetary supply spurred economic development throughout the North and the Northwest. And at the same time, a new industrial class grew rich off of government contracts. Sound familiar? Men like Philip Armour, who revolutionized the canned meat industry. Rockefeller, who conceived new processes for oil refinement. Let's go back to oil and gas. No such thing as global warming. It's your imagination. And Thomas Scott, a wartime innovator in railroad management. Yeah, we'll bring the Chinese over to do our dirty work and then bury them where they fall. The economic revolution didn't stop there, folks. The Republicans enacted the Pacific Railroad Act, granting private railroad companies 6,400 acres of federal land and between $16,000 and $48,000 in loans per mile of the track laid. 120 million acres and 35,000 track miles later came the realization of a long-deferred dream, a transcontinental rail system that opened the vast trackless space of the West. From Walt Whitman. To settlement and economic development. And as a consequence, from 1865 to 1873, industrial production increased by 75%, putting us ahead of every other nation save Britain in manufacturing output. The resulting economic boom created unprecedented opportunities. You guessed it, graft. In 1872, the Credit Mobilier scandal implicated 30 sitting members of Congress, as well as Vice President Schuyler Colfax, in an elaborate double billing and securities fraud scheme associated with the construction of the Union Pacific Railroad line. 3 years later, the Whiskey Ring affair exposed dozens of federal revenue collectors in a massive kickback scheme. On the state and local levels, nowhere is more brazen than New York City, where William M. Tweed, the boss of Tammany Hall, Democratic organization, made an art farm of public graft and fraud. And through the good offices of Thomas Nest, the staff cartoonist at Harper's Weekly, Tweed became an emblem for the excess of the new age. The boom proved lucrative to the small number of men who controlled access to local resources, but much less profitable for the hundreds of thousands of workers who supplied the muscle, the peons. Rarely did it occur to the business or the political elites that they had not prospered strictly on their own talent and merit alone. And they didn't just owe it to workers, they also owed it to the government itself, which lavished Mongols with subsidies and contracts. Tycoons like Leland Stanford and Collis Huntington benefited enormously from federal land grants and government-backed bonds that funded the construction of the transcontinental railways. Industrialists and financiers like Carnegie and J.P. Morgan profited from lucrative wartime contracts supplying steel, arms, and financial services to the Union government. Rockefeller, though often celebrated for his ruthless efficiency in building Standard Oil, also took advantage of favorable state and federal policies, including railroad rebates and tariffs that protected American oil interests. Does that sound like the story is repeating today? Many of the tech CEOs close to our current president and his orbit are also the beneficiaries of major government largeness. Tails Palantir and Bezos AWS, which contracts with U.S. government agencies, defense organizations, and intelligence services, rely heavily on taxpayer dollars. That's our taxes, kids. And public infrastructure. According to new reporting in the Washington Post, Musk's various companies have, quote, received at least $38 billion in government contracts, loans, subsidies, and tax credits, often at critical moments, unquote. And just over a month into our current president's term, the potential conflicts of interest arising from the tax Mongols' coziness with the administration are already extending beyond the hypothetical. Earlier this month, the Wall Street Journal reported that Interpublic Group, one of the big four advertising holding companies, felt pressured to get clients to buy more ads on Musk's social media platform X, lest the current administration potentially get in the way of a $13 billion merger. Think about that. In addition to federal contracts and subsidies, the capitalist powers of the Gilded Age also benefit from government allocation of resources. The Timber Culture Act, 1873, and the Desert Land Act, 1877, granted millions of acres of public land to those with the means to plant trees and irrigate in allotments in the Southwest. The Mineral Land Act of 1872 sold access to valuable metal deposit at a song, no more than $5 per acre, to mining companies, while cattle ranchers freely availed themselves of grazing rights on public land. And the end result is a massive concentration of wealth in the hands of a relatively small number of companies. Talk about monopolies. By the turn of the century, roughly 300 corporations controlled 2/5 of all U.S. manufacturing, and that concentration has spilled over into politics. It now has become the system of corporate life is a new power, for which our language contains no name, argued politician Charles Francis Adams shortly after the Civil War. Quote, "We have no word to express government by moneyed corporations," unquote. And this gentleman, Charles Francis Adams, was right. During the Gilded Age, public life was influenced by wealthy industrialists and financiers who represented powerful corporate interests. Side note, our current president has gotten the Crown Prince of Saudi Arabia to pour $13 trillion into our economy. Can you see our current president saying no? I can't. The U.S. Senate was a perfect embodiment of this reality, such as the senator from Standard Oil or the senator from railroads, Nelson Ulrich of Rhode Island, deeply connected to the Rockefeller Empire, but both marriage and business interests, championed policies that favored the oil industry and protective tariffs for industrial monopolies. Leland Stanford of California, a co-founder of the Central Pacific Railroad, used his Senate seat to advance railroad interests in the West, while Mark Hanna of Ohio, a wealthy industrialist and influential Republican political strategist, was instrumental in securing William McKinley's rise to the presidency. And many of these senators had interwoven their financial interests and personal connections off of sitting on the boards of the very companies they legislated on. And their dominance led to the Senate being preserved as the Millionaires Club, where corporate interests took precedence over public welfare, fostering an era of rampant corruption and economic inequality. I will leave you to your thoughts and to please check out our blog to read the rest of the story in Politico and then reflect what is happening in today's world with our current president and his elitist group. And let's not forget the Crown Prince of Saudi Arabia. Got questions? Got comments? Write us, pwrnetworkllc@gmail.com. Thank you very much and have a great weekend.